What is up, everybody? I'm not going to give you my normal spiel on why I do my draft grades. I gave you that in my last 6 divisional draft grades videos. Today, let's have some fun breaking down every pick, every draft class from the NFC South. To get ahead of it, I think this division did an exceptional job, and after a couple of years ago, this was a division that was certainly one of the laughingstocks of the NFL. I think this is a draft we could look back on, and these teams really starting to keep pace with the rest of the league a little bit better here. But before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please do take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free and easy thing that really does help support these videos and my channel. And a little football animation will even pop up for you, which is fun. Make sure you subscribe so you can check out all of my draft grades videos, and you're not going to want to miss my deep dive team preview series that is now just around the corner. Very excited for that. And I also want to thank Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. And let's begin with the Atlanta Falcons, who made 6 picks on draft weekend, and not until the second round because of their big trade up for James Pierce Jr. last year. But man, with that 16th pick in the second round, pick 48 in the draft, they make one of my favorite picks that any team made in the entire draft, other than maybe another one we're going to talk about that Tampa made in the first round that you probably know what I'm talking about there. But what a fit here for the Falcons. I couldn't have drawn this up any better, from the fact that this is their star cornerback, A.J. Terrell's brother, to the fact that this fills one of, if not their biggest needs as a flexible corner that I think can play in the slot immediately, but also in the outside. But I did look at the Falcons slot cornerback, especially, as probably their biggest area of weakness, depending on how big of a believer you are in their year 2 converted safety to cornerback kind of project in Billy Bowman, who I think had a very up and down rookie season. But then also just from a value perspective, I think this was awesome, bordering on being an absolute steal. Terrell was the 34th player on my big board, so you get him 12 spots later. That's meaningful value. But when you bake in the fact that this is such a great fit, and it rounds out what could be one of the better secondaries in the entire NFL, what's not to love about this pick? I had to give this an S-graded pick, the highest grade I give individual picks. Really excited to watch him. He's a very sticky coverage corner. He has really quick feet, quick mental reactions. He can go man. He can go off zone. I do think some of his zone eyes, like there were some times where he left a little bit too much space in zone, but he's still very young. I still think lots of time to improve his zone IQ and ability to break down route combinations and squeeze some of that space out in the open field a little bit better from some of those coverage calls that will be a part of this system. But from the slot, you don't feel that quite as much. A little bit tighter areas, a little bit more clarity on who he's supposed to be guarding for sure. But he's got a little bit of that like Devon Witherspoon in him as well, where he's not the biggest guy, but he plays the run really well. And he actually did kind of check some good boxes in the pre-draft process. We knew he was going to be a little bit smaller, but he did come out at 186 pounds at 5'10.5" is at least like enough size. There was going to be some fear that he was maybe going to be like below 180, and he does have 31-inch arms. So like that gives him requisite play strength and tackling ability to survive in the nickel. So excited to see how they use him, see him out there with his brother. This was, like I said, just an absolute home run of a pick. One of my favorites that we'll be talking about in these draft grades. But then in the third round, they take Zachariah Branch, close to home, out of Georgia. I like this as a fit for the Falcons quite a lot. I think Branch gives them everything that they don't have in that wide receiver room, including Kyle Pitts. They've got size, they've got physicality, they've got run blockers, but they have really needed some juice, and it felt like they found it for a little bit there with Darnell Mooney until a disastrous second year of his contract last year. And Branch is far from a perfect prospect, but there's a reason teams largely focused on using him as a gadget threat. He has some seriously rare movement ability. You can tell why he was the #1 recruit in his high school class, where he started at USC, started his first game with a big kickoff return, and then after that, it was kind of a quieter college career as he goes to Georgia and a passing game that was not exactly conducive to those talented players success at the college level from a passing game's perspective. In fact, we're going to be talking about Oscar Delp as well, who dealt with some of this at Georgia. He goes to the Saints in this division. But you can certainly tell why Georgia was like, all right, we're largely going to use you on bubble screens, jet sweeps, maybe the occasional crossing route. Let's just get the ball in your hands, where he has, it's a name you don't want to hear affiliated with a player because he was such a bust. But Kadarius Toney, for those that remember watching him, like the way he was able to change directions, stop, start, the jump cuts with the ball in his hands and within his routes as well. Rare elite athletic ability. There's a play, I think it's against Texas, where he catches the ball and kind of does like a 360 spin away from the defense and kind of out angles pursuing safeties that looks like Tyreek Hill in the way that he can move. He doesn't have the top speed of Tyreek Hill. He does have a lot of top speed. He ran, I think, a 4.36 at his pro day or at the combine. 4.35 at the combine. So not quite Tyreek Hill speed, but I do think that is about right. I would say he has great, not elite speed. But what I did like about Zachariah Branch is that he did show flashes of route running. He made some tough catches. It was all in flashes. There was certainly moments where he struggled with physicality down the field, where some of the ball skills could be a little bit more hit or miss. But you saw moments where it's like, man, if he could just get more comfortable getting down the field, it's all in there. So I do really believe in the upside. This was a really deep wide receiver draft, and he ended up my number 16 wide receiver after making my initial top 10. Ended up with a third to a fourth round grade on Zachariah Branch. But that's exactly where he goes here, middle of the third. I think this is a great fit plugging into that wide receiver room. I always talk about getting a complementary group of skill sets to drop in a run after catch demon and speed and juice like this next to Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I really like that as a fit. So the Falcons crushed it on day 2, which they really needed to do after not having a first-round pick from a trade that they were criticized for last year. But this is how you make it back. And they did this last year, too, when they found Xavier Watts as a part of that trade as well. So I think they're, as long as James Pierce can get back on the field and stay on the field, they can look back on this and be sitting just fine with that big trade up that they made, in my opinion, that they do get a lot of hate for. But then in the 4th round, they did make a pick I didn't agree with. Kendall Daniels out of Oklahoma, late 4th here. It's certainly not the end of the world, but this was a massive reach for me. I actually didn't have a draftable grade on Kendall Daniels, but he was an enigma type of player, and I always talk about how these guys are kind of fascinating dart throws to take on day 3. I certainly would have preferred this as more of like a 6th or 7th round pick than a nice 4th rounder, where I do think you can find value and steal some players that could help you. Daniels played like strong safety at Oklahoma. He's long, he's big, he's almost 250 pounds, but he wasn't particularly good in the role that Oklahoma asked him to play, in my opinion. And I question some of the athletic ability playing as kind of that wing sort of like hybrid nickel defender that they had him at, and he does come out and run a 4.75 at his pro day. And I don't really see the vision. I hope they see the vision and can prove me wrong on this, but he's a total project to move to more of an inside linebacker role. And I just feel like if you're going to take someone that is such a projection, I want to feel better about the traits that you have to work with. And what's even interesting as well is he's 6'5", but he only has 32.5-inch arms, which isn't like crazy or anything like that. So he was actually my last ranked linebacker out of the 24 that I wrote up this year. So I'd be pretty surprised if he works out, but I'll be pulling for him as he makes that transition to more of a linebacker role at the next level. Then they take Ontario Thompson out of Washington. I didn't get to write him up, but he was on my radar, tested really well, didn't necessarily produce at a high level at Washington, but we do know Atlanta loves great athletes on the interior of that offensive line. They just traded Ruka Rororo away. And a big part of his production was those loops and stunts and twists and stuff. So I think he could probably fill in and do a lot of that stuff that Rook did for them, and maybe outplay his draft position here, just because that athleticism in this scheme we know plays and can get elevated. So definitely made sense. I don't know that they stole value or this is some can't miss 6th round pick or anything like that. That doesn't really exist anyway. But I said solid pick on that one. I really liked Harold Perkins as a day 3 option in this draft. In fact, I certainly liked him a lot more as kind of a project linebacker than Kendall Daniels. I could absolutely see Harold Perkins actually becoming like a quality starter and kind of an impact player for the Falcons. I liked him more than I expected to, knowing that he was this kind of hybrid player that really was a bit of a bust of a highly recruited guy, started his career as an edge rusher at LSU, suffered a big injury, transitioned to linebacker, and things kind of got quiet with him. But he can, he still has incredible athletic ability. When they do blitz him, his bend might be the best in this draft. Like if he were to have stuck at edge, which I understand why he didn't, because he struggled to get north of 220 pounds. But the way that he can turn the corner when they fire him off the edge, it's special. And he reaches a leverage point that a lot of tackles struggle to deal with. So I think blitzing as a middle linebacker as well, that bend can absolutely play. And this is a system that will send those middle linebackers. So strictly as a third down blitzer, I see a role for Harold Perkins to be utilized inside this system that moves guys around and tries to confuse offensive line protections as much as any team. So I think he's a unique weapon then. And then, like I said, he's really athletic. He does move really well in space. He did run well. He ran a 4.48 at his pro day, and I think that shows. And I actually thought that here in his final year at LSU, where he had gotten some more time to actually learn linebacker and do some actual spot drop, real NFL coverage things at the linebacker position, as opposed to some of the edge type stuff that he did earlier on, I thought he started to show some signs of active eyes and taking stuff away in zone. So I actually had Harold Perkins as a 3rd to a 4th round grade. I absolutely would have taken him before the 6th round. I would have preferred to grab him even earlier there, with that Kendall Daniels pick. So keep an eye on him. I think that was an excellent use of a late 6th round pick. I almost went steal on him for the grade on that. Could certainly argue for it. And then I didn't get to Ethan Nyana out of Ohio State. I single-checked, double-checked, triple-checked to make sure that there wasn't anybody on the Ohio State offensive line that I needed to be watching, because that's typical as a draft analyst getting through tape when I'm, say watching Carnell Tate or whoever it might be on the Ohio State teams and on those tapes. Could be whatever defenses they're facing as well. You end up watching a lot of Ohio State and Alabama and all these big schools throughout the process, and I always want to know what offensive linemen from those typical schools that produce offensive linemen should I be keeping an eye on. And the reason Ethan Nyana was not on my radar is he didn't even start for Ohio State. He was not on my radar, not someone I'm familiar with. They are taking a leap of faith that something was going on at Ohio State, that they see something others didn't, and that he will work out. So, interesting process to take a guy that couldn't start in college, even if it was at Ohio State. But we will find out. I just said solid pick on that, as I didn't write him up. And it's the 15th pick in the 7th round. Any types of flyer on an offensive lineman that you think has potential is pretty par for the course in that range. I didn't spot any undrafted free agent pickups for the Falcons that really caught my eye to wrap things out there. But I did ultimately still give the Falcons an A grade for this draft. Even if I thought Kendall Daniels was a reach, that's damn near a 5th round pick there. It's not to make it's not enough to override the incredible pick of Avion Terrell. And then Zachariah Branch, that makes a ton of sense. I think they made back up with Harold Perkins there in the 6th round. I think considering they did not have a 1st round pick, this was an excellent draft for the Falcons. Before we go any further, I want to thank the sponsor for today's show, Prize Picks, America's #1 sports picks app. On Prize Picks, they have an easy-to-use app where you have a chance and win some money, stringing together lineups where you'll pick any number of player stats, picking more or less on all the sports, all the stats. So whether it's football, picking touchdowns and passing yards, baseball, strikeouts, hockey, you get the point. They have so many options on Prize Picks. They even have team picks now where you can pick the winner, the spread, and totals on any major game. And that's available in most states, including Texas, California, and Florida. And one thing Prize Picks has that I'm excited about is you can follow my handle at TFG_football and follow along with all of my picks throughout the summer. I'll be putting together baseball lineups I have really reestablished my love of the game of baseball, something that goes way back to when I was just a puppy. But having Prize Picks lineups to give you a little rooting interest and a chance to win some extra money is something I have really enjoyed as the baseball season has already begun. And we're going to be diving deep into the stats and trying to pick some winners when football season rolls around. So when you sign up, Prize Picks will give you $50 in bonus lineups. It's going to be code HMA when you do sign up, or click that link in the description below. So thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show, and let's get back to it. But let's go to the Carolina Panthers. This new regime, man, they have done such a good job building this thing back up. This was the laughing stock of the league a few years ago, and man, I think they had another great draft this year. This front office has just been killing it, and I love this draft for the Panthers. Spoiler alert! But you start with Monroe Freeling, the tackle out of Georgia, with the 19th pick. I was a little surprised they went tackle. I kind of wanted to see them go in a different direction just because that would tell me that they have some more faith in the existing tackles on the offensive line. Clearly, they do have their concerns, and I think that's justified. I saw a world where maybe Rasheed Walker plays well. He gets a contract. They do have Taylor Moton there. There's been a lot of talk about him maybe retiring within the next few years. And then Ikem Ekwonu not going to be able to play this year. So, I kind of felt like maybe between those three, you can filter through it and be just fine at tackle. But Monroe Freeling was a hell of a football player to be available at the 19th pick. They just don't make tackles like this very often. And when they do, they don't last long in the draft. And that's what we see here. And Freeling got a lot of criticism for being quite raw. I think as a run blocker, there's a lot of things that he must clean up. There's a lot of mental mistakes and clunkiness and missed assignments as a run blocker that did lead to some questionable tape at times. I will defend his floor as a pass blocker, though. I don't think he got enough credit for where he's at in that phase of the game, which is obviously extremely important. Just the pure physics of him, with that length and his movement skills, he's just a tough player to get around. And a lot of guys that are as tall as him, the best way to, get to the quarterback is to go through them and bull rush them. And I actually think Monroe Freeling has a very good natural anchor. He occasionally stops his feet against inside counters. That's kind of the mental glitch that will show up in pass protection. So again, there's some processing stuff at the O-line position that he needs to get up to speed with. The beauty is he doesn't necessarily have to start here. He might be behind Rasheed Walker for a year, and that could be very good for Monroe Freeling, like a young quarterback sitting for a year. But he also might just beat out Rasheed Walker if things click sooner rather than later. He's a much more physically talented player than Rasheed Walker. And even if his run blocking tape is inconsistent, his upside there is tremendous. And when he has his highlight plays as a run blocker, you can really see the freaky ability that could be there in that phase as well. So hard to argue with getting this player here at number 19. He was the number 15 player in the draft for me, and you get him at 19. That lines up perfectly well. So that's an A-graded pick for Freeling. And then they move up a few spots and get Lee Hunter in the second round, who was a top 50 player in the draft for me. I was a little bit surprised to see them go with another run defender on the interior of that D-line when they have a lot of guys like this, really. I mean, obviously, Derek Brown's one of the best run-defending DTs in the league. They did sign Bobby Brown last year. To be fair, they did let Ashawn Robinson go, but they're going to be able to line up, in their base 3-4. They do like to run 5-1 penny fronts in Evero Evero's scheme as well. You're going to be able to line up with Derek Brown probably as a 3-tech, and then either Bobby Brown and Lee Hunter as a nose, and then the other guy as a 3 or a 4-eye, and just say, you aren't going through our defense. It's not going to happen. You are going to have to go to the edge, and we can funnel our run fits that way as well. So I think improving a run defense that just a couple years ago was historically bad, that has been getting better, and this is a great step towards doing that. And it's not like Lee Hunter is useless as a pass rusher. He's just limited. He's quite slow off the ball. He really is, because he's got this really skinny lower half, but this incredibly powerful upper body. So it's usually more of a steady pocket compression for him, or sometimes he'll win more like power to speed, where he'll kind of shock you and then use agility to get around you. He doesn't really have that like great first step and ability to like compress the pocket with a bull rush. So, or like shoot a gap off the line. Like there's just not a lot of like get off and twitch for him. So he is going to be more limited on third downs, but he can do something on third downs, and maybe even more than what Tershawn Wharton was able to give this team, which was just kind of a disaster of a signing, to be honest. But now Wharton can be truly that pass rush specialist, and you're not going to have to worry about him as an undersized guy on earlier downs. So really a good player they got there. And then they get Chris Brazzell towards the middle to back of the third round. That's really good value for me. I had a second to a third round grade on Brazzell. I see someone that is, as an athlete and an upside projection, very similar to Christian Watson. And I would say as well, like some of the concerns with his tape are very similar to Christian Watson as well, where it's just like week by week, 1 week he's mossing guys and you see the 4.3 speed at his size, and someone that is, you know, he's not your typical Tennessee wide receiver. Jalen Hyatt, Dante Thornton have been very much like one-line track athletes. I like Brazzell better than those guys because he actually can stop his momentum, decelerate, run routes, break inside, and has upside to be more of a well-rounded receiver here than some of those guys that have come out of Tennessee. The upside is tremendous, but the inconsistency with him, it's hard not to think about how Xavier Legette has failed here, who is just the definition of inconsistency. That's really what comes up with Brazzell. It does feel like some weeks it's like it's a lack of focus or something is just off with him, and they're going to have to find a way to get a more consistent player out of him. I do really love that Christian Watson comp, though, and if they can find their version of that player with the existing skill talent here, I do think that fits really well, and they're kind of just admitting like we missed on Xavier Legette, but we still want that role in this offense. So it'll be fun to see him, I guess, compete with Legette and what they can do to utilize him. And because of what this offense has looked like, by the way, I even caught myself saying on the live draft stream, I was like, I don't know if Bryce is a great deep ball thrower, and I don't know that this is like a great fit necessarily. And then I took that back, because you think back to Bryce at Alabama, where he had Jamison Williams and he had an infrastructure where he could push the ball downfield and headhunt a little bit. He was awesome at that at Alabama, and his arm is underrated at doing that. So it's not that he can't be utilized here. It's just, I think, from a play calling perspective and a consistency from the player perspective, it just needs to be better. But he's going to be able to open things up for this team if he hits. So I think that's well worth the swing. Even if he's a very like polarizing boom or bust type of prospect, this is a great range to take that player. Then you go to day 3 of the draft. They take Will Lee out of Texas A&M. I kind of saw just a guy, a like true NFL backup corner. Really just kind of a lack of traits. He's more of a slender guy at 6'1", 190, but he's not really fast. He's got a decent amount of like acceleration, and they kind of used him a lot as a man coverage corner. So, you know, he did a lot of press man. I thought he was pretty good at like kind of riding guys down the sideline, getting his head around to find the ball. He had like some stuff to like, but just not the stickiest coverage tape. But this is roughly the range I had him going. You know, I had a 5th round grade on him. He goes at the very end of the 4th round. So I think that's a reasonable pick as probably a backup cornerback. Even if it's maybe a tick early, but certainly not the end of the world. We'll see if he has more developmental upside than I'm giving him credit for. But then Sam Hecht in the 5th round, amazing pick. I mean, I had Sam Hecht right there next to Jake Slaughter, Logan Jones, Yager Burton, another center out of Kentucky. None of these centers really popped to me, and some of them went like 2nd round, and I disagreed with that assessment. Some of these guys ended up falling down the board a little bit, and it's just not how I saw these players. Sam Hecht was one of my favorites out of that group of centers. In fact, I did have him above Yager Burton, Logan Jones, and Jake Slaughter. I think he can start in the NFL. He's not the traitsiest guy, but he's got decent size, decent play strength, really a smart player, an experienced player that could come in and compete for your starting center job right away after they lost Cade Mays in free agency, which I think was a bummer, man. Like, I really liked Cade Mays. That was going to be a big hole on this offensive line, and to get Sam Heck this late could prove to be a big luxury for this team. So I thought that was a great pick. Someone I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on. He goes at the top of the 5th. And then one of the bigger steals in this draft, in my opinion, and I feel pretty confident in saying this because it feels like we see this every year where some safeties run like 4.6 or 4.58, and teams just kind of, I don't want to say they write them off, but they just push them down the board for other guys that are more athletic and more upside, like at the position, when we've really established, if you look at the top 10 safeties in the NFL, most of them didn't run that great. Whether it's Xavier McKinney was like a 4.58 guy. Same with Brian Branch. Harrison Smith was like 4.57. We did this with Xavier Watts last year, who had no business going in the 3rd round. Yes, theoretical speed and range is important, but what's much more important is the ability to actually like use your eyes, use your head, anticipate where the ball is going to go. And you might be 2 steps ahead of the guy that's a little bit faster than you. And that actually makes a huge difference on the back end. So, okay, you want to drop Zakee Wheatley a little bit because he doesn't have great long speed. That's fine. But you cannot tell me that he's a 5th round player. He had some of the best safety tape in this draft. He does everything so well at the safety position. Again, yeah, single high, like free safety range. No, not necessarily, but they've got Trayvon Merrick to do that and give you a little bit more speed on the back end to be the primary guy that rotates into cover 3. From a split safety alignment or as a buzz safety, he has plenty of athletic ability to give you what you need in coverage. He anticipates things really well. While he isn't fast, he has excellent agility. There were times that he actually reminded me a little bit of Malachi Starks last year, whose feet were just constantly chopping. It gives him quick access to breaks and cuts and response time to everything that he's seeing and processing with his eyes. And then he can fill the run too. Like, he's not the biggest guy. He is 6'3", so that length is really nice. But he's 203 pounds, so he's a little bit more slender. So in terms of like taking on blocks or having the like biggest hit power, and being this enforcer type of safety, no, not necessarily. But he's kind of like a cat back there. He's this little Carolina Panther in your secondary, and I think he starts immediately, man. I think he's just a much more complete player than Lathan Ransom, who's a little bit more of a headhunter, a little bit more boom or bust. I think you can get him in a dime back role where he can kind of play to his style and try to get you some plays. But I think this is just tremendous value, man. He was my number 4 safety in the draft, a 2nd round pick. I've called him out for plenty of other teams saying you should have taken Zakee Wheatley instead of doing this or that. And I think the Panthers were absolutely to benefit here. Excited to see how he pans out. And then they go with Jackson Kuwatch, who I didn't get to. I didn't Kuwatch Jackson here out of Miami, Ohio. So solid pick though. He tested really well. So you were looking for a special teamer and a developmental linebacker to fill out that room, where they were probably just looking at their roster saying, where can we find someone that'll make the team with a 7th round pick. Also didn't spot any noticeable undrafted free agent steals for this team either, but I ended up going with an A grade for the Carolina Panthers as well. A phenomenal draft. I really don't have any criticisms on this draft. I think this team just keeps doing such a good job finding impact players for this roster that a couple years ago was a total mess, and that's just not the case anymore. So really, really excited to see the 2026 Carolina Panthers this year. But let's go to the New Orleans Saints next, who do take Jordan Tyson with the 8th pick in the draft. I really do like this pick. I'm excited for his upside with this offense. I'm excited to see Tyler Shuck now have an O-line, weapons, like a lot of opportunities to just cook. Great coach in Kellen Moore. Tyson brings just so much to this wide receiver room that was largely Chris Olave and then some kind of like fun short to intermediate targets with like Jawan Johnson and Devon Vele. But Tyson and Olave is going to be an absolute handful to deal with. Both of these guys, if they can both stay healthy, that's kind of feels like a big if. So keeping my fingers crossed on that one. Like, we're just a year removed from Olave having a lot of injury questions, and now they take a guy that could not stay healthy in college. And look, I'm pretty well on the record at this with my opinion on Jordan Tyson. Like, I personally was not really comfortable taking this guy inside the top 10 that just had so many injuries in college. I do believe that certain players are more injury prone than others. And I think if you get hurt in college, history has told us more often than not, you're going to get hurt at the next level. So I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be kind of nervous as a Saints fan if my team made this pick. I'm excited. It's a B graded pick for me. But I do have to bake in some of that risk and how I personally felt about Jordan Tyson. But I get it, right? It's kind of a unique conversation where they do have access to the medicals. They might just feel really good about it. The doctors do know more than me. I understand all of that, but it also doesn't erase his history, right? He could be perfectly healthy right now. We don't know that that's necessarily going to hold up. So this was a B-graded pick for me. I totally understand the direction that they went in. It's just top 8 pick on a guy that couldn't stay healthy in college. So kind of like when we gave Caleb Banks a B-graded pick. Really like the fit, really like the upside of the player, but I think you're lying to yourself if you entirely ignore the injury history with this player as well. But hopefully he can stay healthy, and this ends up an A pick because I am on the record saying if you could guarantee me Jordan Tyson stays healthy, he would be my number 1 wide receiver in this draft. So I don't want that to go unheard as well, but he ended up behind the 3 other receivers in this draft that I also really liked because of the injury risks. So we will see how that lands. And then they turn around and get Christian Miller with the 10th pick in the 2nd round. I gave this an S. I mean, this is my number 1 D tackle. I was comfortable with Christian Miller in the upper 20s, even at like 18 to Minnesota. I had thought about it at times. I think he's awesome, man. I think he's a really well-balanced DT1. He didn't get the opportunity to really show off his pass rushing at Georgia, but I think we saw how the athleticism and a lot of the moments where he did have production, you can see it's all in there. You're hoping that you get more pass rush production from him at the next level. I don't think you're ever expecting dominant pass rush production, but good enough. And I think he's an excellent run defender. He's got size. He plays with his hair on fire, was coached well there at Georgia. This guy is strong as an ox, and he's athletic on top of it. So I really was a huge fan. I think he, in a defensive tackle class that had, everybody had a butt about it. Banks injured. Proctor can't play on 3rd down. Lee Hunter, kind of an awkward build with the skinny ankles. Peter Woods was a complete enigma of a prospect in terms of his lack of production. Christian Miller was like just super high floor, felt really good about what you're getting here. I compare him to Kenny Clark, and to get something like that in the 2nd round is phenomenal at a huge position of need for the Saints, as well as that defensive line is really trying to come together. So I give that an S graded pick. And then they take Oscar Delp in the 3rd round. Delp did actually just edge out Eli Stowers for my tight end 2 spot. They had the same final draft grade on them, but giving the slight nod there to Delp. And he ends up going, there was 6 tight ends that were drafted ahead of him. So in my eyes, he slipped a little bit, but you can understand why. He didn't really produce at Georgia in a passing game that really struggled. The biggest thing you noticed with Oscar Delp watching all of his targets is, number 1, there's not a lot of targets. They didn't use him enough. And then number 2, you realize how often he is wide open and stressing defenses with his speed and separation ability, and the quarterback is either throwing the ball 5 yards short or 5 yards over his head. So between utilization and bad quarterback play, Oscar Delp didn't have too much of a chance to succeed here. So you can certainly question the lack of production for Oscar Delp, but he really checks a lot of boxes, man. He's not tiny. He's 6'4", 245. He does have the frame, in my opinion, to put on another 5 pounds and play at a really good, healthy 250. He blocks his butt off. I think he can absolutely be a nice inline blocking tight end, especially if you can put on just a little bit more weight. But as a lead blocker, as a slot wide receiver in a role like Jawan Johnson plays here, he's an ass kicker from the wing and in the slot as a blocker. But I do think he had developmental upside to actually be a legit inline wide tight end. And as a receiver, it's just really easy to imagine if you just used him more, you see him getting open. It's not like he had a ton of drops. it's pretty damn easy to imagine him just being a more productive, difference-making player. I mean, his speed train running ability after the catch is legit. He ran a 4.49. He's an absolute handful to catch up with and then get to the ground. There's knocks, like his contested catch win rate was pretty low, just 2 for 12 on contested catch opportunities, if you can call them that. Again, a lot of these are like he's open and then the ball's 5 yards behind him. He has to stop and turn around, and because he runs into the defender, he gets charted a contested catch opportunity. And it's like, that was not really a catchable ball, but it went down that way anyway. He doesn't have a ton of creativity after the catch. But if he gets the ball more, maybe he can develop some of that. So I really liked Oscar Delp. I think this was a really great pick, and it's a good opportunity for him to not have to like come in and be the guy right away. You have Jawan Johnson. They signed Noah Fant, which isn't a bad pro comp for Oscar Delp, by the way. So you're going to have probably a year to kind of like figure this thing out. But by year 2, wouldn't be surprised if Oscar Delp is a name that we start talking about a good bit more. Then go to day 3. They take Jeremiah Wright, who I didn't get to his tape, unfortunately. He was very much on my radar. I knew he was a name that was going to go somewhere around this range. So I think it's a reasonable pick. He's a big mauler type, I know that, and he converted from defensive tackle to offensive line early on. So we'll see what they can continue to develop out of him, but it's definitely a traits-based day 3 offensive line pick. Kind of par for the course. I said that was a solid pick. And then 4 picks later, they take Bryce Lance. This was, kind of a draft victory moment for me, not to like dance on, Bryce Lance going lower than he wanted to. For his sake, I wish he would have gone earlier. And all that stuff. But I just never saw the day 2 hype with this player. I think there's a lot of flaws in his game that were not being discussed by a lot of the just kind of draft Twitter. And I mean, this guy had a lot of buzz, right? Like I saw him going top 50 at times. And I really question his ball skills, his route running. I think he's a stiff athlete, not a great run after catch player. He's got speed, and he makes the occasional, like, really impressive highlight reel catch. And maybe he does have, like, this incredible highlight reel on YouTube that people get super excited about. But I was fortunate enough to go through and watch all of his targets, and there's a lot of flaws here. And he's an older prospect, and with the way he runs routes and genuinely moves as an athlete, I don't even see that much upside. And you kind of have some vertical threats in here already now with Olave and Tyson. So I don't know that he's going to get a lot of like designated opportunities. So not necessarily a player I'm betting on, to be honest. I think a lot of people are going to get excited about Bryce Lance going here. This is about exactly where I had him going. And, as far as a fit, I don't see a whole lot of opportunities for him either in case, unless those top wide receivers are getting hurt. But it's not like it's a bad pick. I think it's a very solid, reasonable pick to continue filling out a wide receiver unit that had like no depth. And then Lorenzo Styles, if I had a knock on some of these earlier picks, it would be like maybe take a swing at a nickel corner. I think Jalen Kilgore was still there. That would have been insane if they went that direction, for example. But they do address it here in Lorenzo Styles out of Ohio State, Sonny Styles' brother. And I am fascinated by Lorenzo. Ironically, a player that he made me think of. I don't think I put it down as the actual pro comp, but if he reminded me of anybody, it was Alontae Taylor, who came into the league like straight line speed, loved to hit people, and, kind of good ball skills, right? And then they just kind of developed him over time after some really up and down start to his career. There's some similarities with Lorenzo Styles, who was a wide receiver at Notre Dame, who transferred to Ohio State and struggled to get on the field, kind of was a rotational player for them. But he was fun to watch. I mean, he has legit 4.3 speed. He flies around. He loves to hit. He's going to be an awesome special teamer for you. And then if you do like imbue some confidence and trust in him, I could see him developing into a good kind of like big nickel type of player in a Brandon Staley defense. I don't think that happens year 1. But as a late 5th round pick, I really like the fit here in New Orleans and see a path for him to make a difference for this team in a position of need. And I said that was a good pick there. Then they take another gamble on a fast player and Berrien Brown out of LSU. He got open. Just didn't catch everything, and he's small, but that's about where I had him going, is just kind of a speed player on day 3. So just lots of new wide receiver depth for this Saints team and a lot of speed dropped into this unit. And then I also think the TJ Hall pick was a very good pick for the Saints in the 7th round, which was the range I had on TJ Hall, 6th, 7th round. He's just kind of an interesting player where he's 6 feet tall. He's a little bit thinner, played outside corner, but probably lacks the speed to play out there consistently. But he is quick and instinctive and had a lot of ball production. And I think maybe would project best as a nickel at the next level. But he's a little bit of a kind of taller, lanky nickel. So in terms of like typecasting where he's supposed to play, it's a little bit more challenging as you project his skill set to the next level. His actual skill set, I would say, plays in the nickel, but his physical profile might have some issues with it. But like I said, zone-heavy defense, nickel corner opportunity, and Brandon Staley's defense here. Wouldn't be stunned if either TJ Hall or Lorenzo Styles eventually become players in this system. So really like the Saints draft. And this one also came out as an A for me. I think getting Christian Miller where they got him in the 2nd round definitely makes up for the kind of built-in added injury risk of taking Jordan Tyson with the 8th pick in the 1st round. And that comes out as an A grade for me. So things keep going well for these teams in this division. And I don't think it's going to be a huge surprise either that I loved the Tampa Bay Buccaneers draft. I mean, they to me made a generationally good pick, one that I do believe we will look back on over the course of the next 10 years and say, what the hell was the NFL thinking letting Reuben Bain go to the 15th pick in the draft? Like, we're still talking about Derwin James falling to like 17. This kind of makes me think about that. To me, when you bake in positional value into everything, this was the number 1 player in my big board, the best, most valuable player in the draft. And it happened to be at a position of immense value, edge rusher, where we just saw Will Anderson get $50 million a year. That is a massive need for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, and by the way, he's 100% their type. The edge rushers they have in that room, Yaya Diaby's like 6'3", 270. Walker is like 6'2", 266, who I loved in last year's draft. That's Reuben Bain's profile. They love these like compact, low to the earth, strong, athletic dudes on their in their edge room, and they got as good of a one as you could possibly put into a Todd Bowles defense. Everything from the value to the need to the scheme fit. I don't have words like how this happened, how amazing it is for the Bucs. This dude's freaking awesome, man. He's incredibly fun to watch. Mike Renner said it. I agree with him. He is the strongest edge rush prospect I've ever watched. And yeah, he's got shorter arms. To me, yeah, it reduces his margin for error a little bit. Maybe it shows up in spots and reduces his efficiency so that maybe he's only the 8th best edge rusher in the league instead of a top 4, like Will Anderson, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett level type of guy. Maybe that happens, but also like show me the tape where the arm length hurts his game, at Miami, going on a championship run, kicking ass, taking names. It ain't there because he's, why? Because he's crafted his game around it. He understands how to play low, how to set things up with his feet. He keeps guys' hands off of him, and then he will get up and under your pads with that corkscrew bull rush and obliterate reps. He's one of the best run defending edge rush prospects I've ever watched. There is no way you can tell me the arm length hurts him as a run defender. He's got really rare bend. Like I feel like people knocked him because he, I don't think he ran his 40, but if he did, he probably would run like a 4.66. Like he's not a burner, but that doesn't mean he isn't one of the most athletic edge rushers in this draft. He's got really quick feet. He's got incredible get off and an explosive first step. And he's one of the bendiest edge rushers in this draft. With that core strength he has, it's incredibly challenging to block. People say, oh, he can't stand up and be a 3-4 outside linebacker. He did it 500 times at Miami, playing all over the defensive line at Miami. I cannot, for the life of me, understand how you let Ruben Bain fall to the 15th pick in the draft. There are so many teams that should have taken him, in my opinion, starting with the number 2 pick in the New York Jets. I think they regret this, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are to benefit. I've never felt more confident in a 15th overall pick being, in my opinion, who should be the favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I think someday he will be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. I swear by this draft pick. I literally can't get the words out of my mouth. Like, this was so unbelievable for the Bucs. I just wax poetic about this pick. And then they made a really good pick in the second round. Josiah Trotter, I can see especially too, like, why they went with him over some of the other linebackers in this draft. Like, I think Golday was still there, and even CJ Allen was still there. Golday a little bit more of a, like, interesting project type with what he did at Cincinnati. And, you know, CJ Allen wasn't super explosive and wasn't a great blitzer, which is really important for Todd Bowles. Josiah Trotter was an awesome blitzer at Missouri, on top of being a full-sized, young, excellent run defending linebacker. So I really see how he fits and why he was their guy in this draft. He's a little bit stiffer in coverage, and you know, those are the knocks on him, and kind of why he was a second round linebacker prospect and not necessarily a first one. But inside this defense, I absolutely love the fit. I think he's going to be a nuisance for opponents. And when you get to third down, they will neutralize a lot of those coverage concerns by making him a blitzer. He is one of the better linebackers in recent years in terms of, like, getting off of blocks as a run defender. He plays with his hair on fire, grew up around the game. He's the son of Jeremiah Trotter. So there's a lot to like in his game, even if he has some pretty clear deficiencies with stiff hips and overall, like, fluid movement skills. Maybe never going to be a, you know, superstar linebacker, but definitely a good fit and an excellent pick with where they got him. I gave that pick an A. And then they take Ted Hurst here in the middle to end of the third round. And I had a 4th round grade on Ted Hurst. This got a lot of buzz as well. But with how the wide receivers were falling off the board, I can't be overly critical of this. I can't give it an A just because we're staying true to my grading criteria and the process here, to be fair to every team. And this was a 4th round player that goes in the 3rd. I have some questions about Ted Hurst, but it's still a really good pick. A good pick gets a B for me here. So, like, true vertical field stretching ability, tested off the charts. He's pretty instinctive after the catch as well. And he made a lot of crazy impressive catches all over the field at Georgia State as well. And I don't think he's a bad route runner either. So, like, there is a lot to like in Ted Hurst. I fully understand why people got as excited about him as they did. And I fully understand why the Bucs felt the desire to take him here. I've talked about how wide receiver is kind of a sneaky need for this team, so I agree with going with wide receiver here. But some of the concerns on him and why he was a 4th round graded guy for me is I do think he played below his size in terms of the physicality elements of the position, and that was at Georgia State. Like, I felt like when he did deal with longer corners, they really were able to disrupt his routes and make him uncomfortable down the field. He did have a really high drop rate, which can happen with some of these vertical threats, but not every deep ball receiver in this draft dealt with drops, and it wasn't always like deep down the field when you saw drops with him. There was times where he's running a post or, you know, out route, and he's not quite tracking it through. It clanks off his face mask or something like that. And he played at Georgia State. Like, he was beaten up on future accountants down there, with all due respect to their, you know, the teams he went up against. But, you know, it's going to be a jumping level of competition. There was just enough dings for me on him that I guess I ended up a little bit lower on him. But I do love the fit, and I love the fit as that outside, athletic, vertical threat type of wide receiver with what they have, right? I think Ibuka is really good in the intermediate game, in the short game. You've got K-Dot, and you've got Chris Godwin's kind of your catch and run, short to intermediate guy as well. McMillan, we'll kind of see what they can get from him long term. I think Hurst is going to kind of compete with McMillan, but this gave them a skill set that was missing in this wide receiver room. So I think this was a really good fit and landing spot for Ted Hurst. Again, I gave that pick a B, and then they go with Keontae Scott out of Miami. Another guy I was kind of lower on, and I had him 3rd to a 4th round grade. That's where he goes here, middle of the 4th round. he got a lot of buzz as well. But in reality, I saw a 25-year-old nickel corner that didn't have very good coverage tape. That's why I was lower on him. Yet we're here, and I'm saying this was a great pick, and we get to wax poetic about this pick as well, because if there's a team that is going to, maybe even to a fault, or maybe overly prioritize run support and physicality and playing, batshit crazy in the secondary, as opposed to like coverage consistency, I would say that is Todd Bowles' Buccaneers. Keontae Scott is 100% a Tampa slot corner, like plug and play right into what they like from these guys. Wouldn't be surprised if he's their starting nickel right away. You got Winfield and Tyke Smith behind him. Those guys are all cut from the same cloth. Although I think Tyke and Antoine Winfield much better coverage players. But, at his age, and his aggressive tendencies, I don't know that Keontae Scott's ever going to be the most consistent coverage nickel corner, but they blitz these guys a lot. They demand that they fill the run and bring that just fire to the middle of their defense. It's pretty easy to understand why he was their type of guy, and he actually had become a value even for me, who was lower on Keontae Scott here in the middle of the fourth round. Then they take Demonte Capehart out of Clemson. I mean, this lined up pretty well. I fit to a 6th round grade on him. Someone that in 6 years at Clemson with his athletic profile never carved out more than a rotational role, but he's pretty good in a rotational role, and I think he'll manage to carve his way into a rotation eventually at the NFL level. Just a guy that didn't really stand out, but wasn't horrible against the run and has a lot of the traits that can translate to the next level. So decent enough pick there in the 5th round. Don't think he's ever going to be a starter or anything for you. But then they take Billy Schrauth out of Notre Dame 5 picks later in the 5th round. And I think he could be a starter for them someday. He was actually my number 9 interior offensive lineman. I thought he was pretty athletic. He was tough as hell, which is, typical of Notre Dame offensive linemen. Good technique. Positional flexibility, in my opinion. Like, I think he could maybe be a center, but as a guard, which is what he played at Notre Dame, sit for a year or two behind Ben Bredesen, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if he's starting in a couple of years at left guard and is pretty damn solid, because it's kind of what Notre Dame does, is just puts mid-range, like starting caliber offensive linemen in the league every year, and Billy Schrauth screamed that to me. He's not unlike Robert Hainsey really in any way, who the Bucs took. He was actually a 3rd round pick, the 95th pick in that draft. But he's turned into a just very solid starting caliber lineman. No, not a superstar or, best player on anybody's O-line, but definitely playable. And I think he can do that probably sooner rather than later. It's just they don't have a ton of opportunities. But maybe you have injuries and he gets that a little sooner than you were expecting. And then Bauer Sharp, didn't get to him out of LSU, so I can't really speak on that one necessarily. I did have him in the little on the radar section of my tight end rankings. Got invited to the combine, ran a 4.63, but just played at 3 different schools, never really produced. So hoping they can get a better pro than college player in Bauer Sharp there. And then the Bucs did have an undrafted pickup that stood out to me. Eric Rivers out of Georgia Tech. He might have to be practice squad in year 1 just because that wide receiver room's a little bit contested right now. But I had Rivers like right up there just behind Ted Hurst in terms of like, yeah, this dude has a chance to be a difference-making like vertical threat at the next level. I'm very surprised he did not get drafted. Like we saw that run in the middle of the 4th round last year on especially like Arian Smith and Deontay Thornton. I think Eric Rivers probably a better like true vertical threat wide receiver than those two guys. And they went in the 4th round last year. So they got a couple of really good swings, honestly, at someone in an offense with Baker Mayfield that can really push the ball downfield and take advantage of a field stretcher like that. So if Hurst, for some reason, like can't make that jump from Georgia State and it's too much for him, maybe you get a guy like Eric Rivers who kind of had an inverse situation where he played at Georgia Tech where their passing game was not conducive to his skill set producing at all. but he did still show some good stuff when he got his opportunities. So I really like that as a pickup. We'll see where that goes for him. But I gave this one an A+, man. I did. The Ruben Bain pick, just, if this is a test score, this is an 11th grade chemistry test. Ruben Bain is like, you're starting at like, you got 120% on your test. Like, that is just a ridiculous pick. And then they did a great job after that. The only like minor, like, if you can even call it a critique, but pick that was a B instead of an A was Ted Hurst, going maybe a smidge earlier than I had him ranked, but that's not enough to stop this from being an A+ draft. And right now is my number 1 ranked draft class out of the 28 that we've done so far. We'll just have to wait and see if the AFC South manages to take that crown. Very much looking forward to that. That should be out tomorrow, and then we will be done with these draft grades videos. I will be revisiting my 2023 draft grades in a one-off video within the week, and then we'll be heading to deep dive season. So lots of exciting stuff here on the channel. Make sure you are subscribed. If you enjoyed today's video, please do take a second to hit that like button. I really appreciate it. And let me know your comments down below. Was I too generous to this division, or do you, like me, think these teams crushed the NFL draft and the NFC South is starting to maybe make some waves and gather some respect after some rough years? But thank you so much for watching. We'll talk soon. Cheers.